boat 2 is loaded.
Alright, your boat's full, go.
Can't help but feel like it's leaving Alpha today.
Alpha's being gunned down on that beach.
They were like...
Yeah, they told us to go. Alpha 1 load! Alpha 1 load! Literally every man for...
Greetings, this is dslyecxi, and welcome to another episode of Hindsight. Today we'll be doing something a bit different. Recently we've looked at scenarios from the platoon and squad leader perspective, and in this one I'm just another automatic rifleman in the 2nd Fire Team of Bravo. The incident in question comes towards the end of a mission as we're making our way to an extraction point where we expect to find boats ready to ferry us away. A short time earlier we ran into a major ambush, and we have reason to expect that the enemy is working to prevent us from leaving the area. Thanks to heavy fog, everything that's been happening has been happening suddenly and violently at close range. For this video, I'm going to first go through the sequence of events from my perspective, then come back around and talk about everything in further detail. At this point in the mission, we were running somewhat low on ammo and supplies, and only one medic was alive from Alpha.
Bravo, this is Alpha Medic. Hi. Does anybody need anything? Because I'm the only medic left.
I'm going to get 2 mags. There's no boats.
As we arrived at the shore, we discovered that there were enough boats to get us all out to safety.
It's like at least 5 assault boats.
I have eyes on 6 boats here. There is space for 30 people.
Bravo, the furthest 3 boats are ours.
Fill up these boats.
Alpha 1, use these rocks.
What happened next happened extremely quickly. As Bravo was moving to mount up, shooting erupted from the jungle behind us. Alpha was taking the brunt of the contact, so Bravo quickly mounted up and prepared to head out. Moments before we pulled away, I saw an enemy soldier run out on the beach and start unloading on a nearby Alpha member. This was a particularly bad sign. Bravo pushed off in the boats, and the shoreline battle quickly faded from view in the fog.
Can't help but feel like it's leaving Alpha today.
Alpha's being gunned down on that beach.
They were like...
Yeah, they told us to go.
As we were heading out to sea, dslyecxi, my team leader, asked the squad leader where we were going, assuming that it must be an island further south.
Where are we going? Emery Island?
I knew there was a very good chance that we were going to end up back on that beach one way or another, so I suggested just cutting west and landing on a nearby island.
Well, we just cut to this little western thing.
Yeah, go ahead and do that.
Cut it west. There's an island here that we can just sit on.
Literal seconds after getting ashore on this island, the order came for the boat drivers to go back.
I kind of doubt.
Boat drivers, go back. People got left behind on the beach.
I waited for the question to be asked if anyone wanted to volunteer.
Anyone want to volunteer?
I could do it, and hopped in a boat. With Fraxid in another boat in front of me, we headed in, following the tracers and muzzle flashes towards friendlies. I was working up a plan in my head as I went, knowing that the front position of the boat allowed you to use your weapon with a wide arc of fire. I had a saw, and that was the perfect place for me to be, but first I needed to drive into position.
Wait, come on, MPL, Mikey, pick it up, let's go!
As soon as one of the survivors got on board, I hopped forward and deployed my saw, asking for someone else to take the driver position. This was just in time.
Somebody get on the driver.
I can hear me. How are you feeling over there?
I barely registered that someone was asking for status on the radio because, in the situation we were in, what was happening around us was requiring my undivided attention. As we pulled back from the beach, we could see the other boats still loading passengers, so we held to try and cover them.
Dslyecxi, you up?
Yeah. Mikey had just woken up on the beach, so we drove back to try and pick him up.
Bravo boat, abort all rescue.
I think Mikey's
Come on
still
back.
water there.
Yeah.
Over the radio, the squad lead and my team lead called us to abort. The issue here was that they had no idea what was happening where I was, and while they were in leadership positions above me, they simply weren't part of what was going on in my immediate vicinity, and to borrow a line from Han, there was no time to discuss this in committee. As we were backing up, it looked like the other boat wasn't moving, but then it started. I looked away, and when I looked back, it was no longer there.
Delarue, you alive?
Let's make sure that boat's actually coming. We moved forward to make sure they could also get away, and I realized that the boat was just gone. The only thing I could think of was that it had sunk, so I called for us to leave since there was nothing more we could really do at that point, and it looked like there were enemy all over it. What the fuck happened?
Back off, we gotta go.
Having been shot, I was unloading with a saw as we backed up. It's exactly what I'd hoped being at the front of the boat would permit. Not the being shot part, of course.
I think they sank their boat, there's not really anything you can do about that.
Alright. Delarue, are you alive?
Back on the shore, a firefight was still clearly going on. Someone had been left behind.
Pretty sure my lungs are filled with lead and water.
The first trip had been a fantastic example of how fog of war can change the dynamics of both being a leader and a team member. The risk was me. The reward was survivors, in this case 3 other people. It had been worth it. The moment we got back, I jumped out, ran to another boat, and headed back in. Risking myself and one assault boat to get whoever was left behind was again an easy decision. I had the firepower to make a difference.
Only 2 is fording the river here.
I had a different plan this time. As I got closer to where friendlies were on the beach, I turned away, doing a wide loop before heading back in. This allowed me to set up straight in and pick up more speed in the process. On the radio, someone reported this, likely thinking that it was an unconscious driver. I heard it, but I didn't have time to talk about it. Feeling my speed was sufficient, I switched to the front position, deployed my AR, and coasted in.
Yo, let's go!
It worked beautifully. On the radio, I could hear Ninja Socks telling someone to tell the boat drivers to change to AlphaNet, so I went ahead and did that.
Hey guys! Please, board! We had everyone, and as we started to back off, I told Alpha this. You the guy in? Get us out of here. I think we got all the survivors.
Okay, roger.
As we were pulling back, tracers began passing us on the left, headed into the beach. This was Bravo, having waited until they were sure that all friendlies were away before laying down some suppressive fire. We made it out. The first trip recovered 3 people, while the second got another 2. Stepping back slightly, let's look at this in the full context of what was happening. As Bravo was leaving, Alpha was getting attacked by several squads of enemy.
Ooh, I got shot.
People were being wounded, and the squad leader, Chris Shaw, was shot unconscious just as he was about to give the order to mount up. Cake took charge, directing people onto the boats, and they were able to launch 2 boats, but only 4 people were on them. Everyone else was getting hammered. When I arrived, I was able to pick up Cake and Mike Papa Lima, then Mikey a short time later. Delarue in the 3rd boat came in to pick up others, while Fraxid ended up getting knocked out and drifted near the shore.
The interesting thing is I could actually GP support from here.
You could see where you were shooting at, sure.
I mean, I know where they are.
While this was happening, Daishi took advantage of the short range the island was at and started firing smoke grenades towards the pickup zone, with Specky joining in. This was a good example of thinking about what you can do to contribute when you're not able to more directly support something. Delarue had Green Tea and Judge on board, with MG Bait unconscious nearby. This is where the magic happened. This is where we got peak Arma. I saw it happen at the time, but my brain simply didn't register it. Let's look at my perspective again, slowed down, to reveal what happened to Delarue's boat. MG Bait had ragdolled into the boat and sent it flying because Arma physics are special. Back in the olden days, this would have likely meant that those players' mission was over, but fortunately over the years, better ways to mitigate this have been introduced. Seeing this happen, the admin quickly healed Delarue and Green Tea and had Judge rejoin in place, getting them all back into play in short order. The boat was totaled, so they ran to the coast to signal for help. Meanwhile, MG Bait was drawing on combat skills that he'd been honing since the Paleolithic, trying to fight off the soldiers rushing him on the beach. It worked right up until it didn't, and he died as I was returning to the extract island for the first time. On that same island, Daishi realized that he could wade his team to a nearby beach in order to get a view of where the remaining survivors were headed.
2. I think we can move north. It's only... I think we can ford this?
He started that way as I drove off to try to rescue the other batch. By the time I made it to them, Green Tea was dead, but both Judge and Delarue were extracted. Those killed on the original beach were Rico, the Catwug, and MG Bait. At the secondary beach, it was Green Tea. Overall, Alpha had arrived at the beach with 12 people, and ultimately extracted 8 of them. Given the intensity of the fire and the number of contacts, this wasn't bad at all. This isn't really a lessons learned sort of video from a tactical standpoint. I mostly want to talk about the more subtle parts of being a team player and working in confusing environments. Things can go south very quickly in Arma. In this case, the Shoreside ambush was an example of how extremely low visibility and fast-moving enemy units could rush a friendly force and inflict enough casualties to significantly disrupt their exfil. Had this been a clear day or zero fog, the outcome would have been much more heavily in our favor, but that wasn't the case. From my perspective, being a team member in this kind of environment entails a lot of nuance. When we were being ordered into the boats as contact was erupting, I didn't say anything. It's important to remember that I was just another member of a fire team. My squad leader was taking their orders from the platoon commander, and our fire team leaders were taking their orders from the squad leader. In that kind of situation, my job was to do what they said and apply my role as best as I could. We were leaving, so I couldn't use my AR, and while I certainly didn't want to leave friendlies on the beach, those were the orders, and it was important that I, and every other member of Bravo, heeded them in order to successfully carry out that order. Every member of Bravo was on the same page, and every member of Bravo was on their boats and headed out shortly after. If I wanted to be in a position to change or more significantly influence this sort of scenario, I could have taken fire team leader, squad leader, and so forth. But when I'm a fire team member, I try to avoid giving suggestions in this kind of situation unless asked for, or if I think that something's being done that's going to negatively influence people's experiences. Backseat leading is obnoxious and corrosive, and it's something that our group as a whole makes efforts to avoid. If someone thinks they can do better, they can just slot up and do so. One of the best experiences in this game is being put in leadership positions, and we always encourage people to step up and give it a shot. It's hard to fully grasp just how much is going on until you've been in those shoes yourself, and backseat leading can undermine the experience not just for the leader, but also for those depending on that leader. This aspect came up immediately afterwards, as it looked like we were about to head far out to sea. I wanted to nudge us in a better direction, so I suggested heading for the close-by island instead. This wasn't me saying that we should go back in, but rather me trying to put us in a position where if the leadership made that decision, we'd be able to quickly execute it. It was their call to make, after all. I've made those kind of decisions in those kinds of roles plenty of times in the past, and this was their turn to do it. I thought we'd be able to make a difference, but it was up to them to decide to try in the first place. When it was asked if there were volunteers, of course I jumped at it and headed in. This changed the dynamic and allowed me to act on my desire to do something to help out, which was a satisfying opportunity regardless of how it played out. Finally, the radio comms at the end are worth touching on. There's a saying in aviation: aviate, navigate, communicate. In an emergency, you have to keep flying the plane before you can worry about other aspects. I paid attention to the radio during my rescue attempts, but if it didn't matter or was subjectively the wrong call, I didn't respond or heed the order. The main example of this was the rescue being aborted. As I noted previously, it wasn't something I had time to discuss. I was busy. I had to be confident that I was making the right call for the right reasons, and I had that confidence, so I continued with what I was doing. It wasn't that the calls were wrong, it's simply that when applied to the context in which they were received, they were overruled by the situation itself. I had trusted my leaders to make the right call earlier, and at this point, it was time for them to trust me.
Abort all rescue.
I think Mikey's
Come on
still
back.
water there. Mikey! Mikey behind you!
Mikey, turn the fuck
Come
around.
on!
I'm probably gonna wind up gripping for a while I patch myself up.
Oh, Jesus. Alright. He's in.
So there we have it, a neat little scenario that showed off some of the interesting aspects of both leadership and teamwork. If you enjoyed this, there are a few things you can do that would help ensure more are made. There's always the basic aspects of subscribing, enabling notifications, ringing the bell, but there's also my Patreon campaign, which directly supports the effort required to produce videos like Hindsight, Art of Flight, and the VTTP series. Patreon is what makes these possible to continue with. Aside from that, the best assistance comes from spreading the word and sharing this with anyone you think would enjoy it. Finally, if you have thoughts on what happened here, or aspects that you particularly enjoyed, let me know in the comments. Going forward, my plan is to do not only the larger breadth Hindsight episodes like the last few, but also more concise ones like this. I think that should make for a nice mixture. Anyway, thanks as always for the support, and until next time, take care.
Let's go to the other side of this island. Ow, they fucking shot me!
Let's move!
We're technically vulnerable to this.
As always, I was just about to get in the boat when I pass out, and just
I'll
in
have
the
you
black
know,
water.
when you passed out under the water, it flung their boat up onto the shore and blew them all up, and I had to admin heal them.